Hey everyone, and welcome to Bridget's Healthy Kitchen. My name is Bridget Fuliaki Davis, and you are most welcome today to be here with me as we do another recipe straight out of my brand new cookbook, Treat Yourself Healthy. Today we're doing a recipe known as caramelized apple full. It is on page 79 of the cookbook, and it is in the second chapter. So one of the things that you will notice when you do get your copy of this cookbook, and if you've pre-ordered your copy, it is literally on its way. It is so close to being delivered to you. You still have the opportunity to order your own copy, because remember, this book is over 200 recipes that are sugar-free, gluten-free, and majority of them are dairy optional as well, and they're all healthy snacks, treats. Pies, muffins, cookies, cakes, slices, mousses, puddings, all sorts of wonderful things like that. Today's recipe that we're doing out of the book is this caramelized apple full on page 79, and it is in the second chapter. So what I tried to do when it came to the book is I want to give every single chapter a bit of an identity. So the first chapter is the nostalgic kitchen. So it's like recipes that remind me of my mum's cooking, my grandma's cooking, but all healthy, of course, healthy versions. The next chapter we're working from today is the modern kitchen. And the modern kitchen is food when you're in a hurry. So food that uses the appliances that you might have already purchased as well. And when it comes to the apple full, which is page 79, this is actually an old recipe that I have modernized. And of course there is no dairy, there is no gluten, there is no sugar, and there is no grain as well. So I reckon we should probably get into the recipe. So I'm going to put the book here and let's start cooking the recipe. It is a simple recipe, and that's what I love about the modern kitchen chapter, is I tried to create recipes that were simple. They were food in a hurry when you wanted to source something that was really delicious, but also extremely healthy at the same time. So when it comes to a full, we're firstly going to be making an apple version. You could use other fruit if you wanted to, but I'm going to be using green apples. And you want to start off with two sort of medium-sized green apples and just give them a bit of a peel. I'm using my favorite peeler. This is known as a Rex peeler or a speed peeler, and it's literally the fastest and the easiest way to peel fruit and vegetables, as you can see. So you want to start with peeling it, and then we're going to be creating just some small dice out of the fruit. So the recipe that I'm giving you guys today, the one that's in the book for caramelized apple full, makes enough for 2 serves. And it's one of those desserts that is so special that you can literally, you can make this for a dinner party. If you're having people over for a dinner party and you really want to spoil them, but you don't want to spend too much time in the kitchen, this recipe can be one of those that you could use. But it's also easy enough that if you're just feeling a little bit peckish and you want to have something a little bit delicious and healthy, it won't take you long to create it. So create a small dice with your apple, and I always find the best way is, as you saw, I just took the flesh off the apple and I'm just creating this brunoise or small dice, which is not hard at all. And then what you want to do, you want to put your pan on. So I've got a frying pan, as you guys can see over here. My frying pan is quite heavy bottomed frying pan. I do like to have a bit of metal down here. You want to turn it on, and you want to select about a medium temperature. So I prepared a bit more apple here. So this is my 2 apple quantity that I have for my full. And if you're wondering about the origins of the word full, now for some people, this may seem like a really odd thing to name a dessert, and I have to agree with you. Like when I first heard of a full, I had to have a bit of a giggle, because a full is someone we know is a bit of a jester, someone who's maybe not too bright. They tend to be called a full. So what would you call a dessert a full? Take it from the Brits. So this is a British pudding, and it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, literally. And there's a couple of origins to the word full and why it was named a full. The first one, and look, I don't know which one is correct, but the first one is that the word full is, the derivative comes from the French word fouler, which means kind of like to crush or to press. And originally, the fruit that you would put into a full, and it tended to be gooseberries, like gooseberry full was kind of the recipe that's been in many, many historical cookbooks. You would press or crush the gooseberries to make this kind of a puree of fruit, and then you would mix it through usually traditionally whipped cream or a clotted cream. So that's kind of what a fool is. Well, I've modernised it. I have made it a bit more healthy, which is, you know, my normal twist. And what we're going to be doing, hands hot now, what we're going to be doing is creating a full, yes, we're using fruit, but we're using a very low sugar fruit, but you could as well use gooseberries if you have fresh gooseberries, but any type of berry would actually work quite nicely in this. Like maybe you've got an abundance of raspberries or strawberries or blueberries, this would still work really, really well. But apples is kind of traditional in our household, so I'm using apples. So I didn't put anything into the pan as you saw. I literally just heated the pan up on medium heat, added the apples, giving them a bit of a mix around, watching that they don't burn. And this is why I've got a pan that's quite heavy bottomed. When the metal is too thin, it can tend to burn a lot quicker or a lot easier than when you've got a heavy bottomed pan and a good quality metal. Because what happens when you've got a thick bottomed pan is the heat is distributed very evenly throughout the entire pan, and you don't have hot spots and cold spots. So keep an eye on it, give it a bit of a twist. And then what I'm going to be doing is taking up my sweet as fibre syrup and just starting with a couple of tablespoons. I'm going to be adding that into the apples and just kind of allowing it to cook itself here. Do a little bit of work, get a little bit delicious, turn that heat down, make sure we're on a medium. We want it to kind of start to stew now. So as I was saying, the first sort of history that I read about the whole idea of making a fool as a dessert was, number one, it was derived from the French word fouler, which means to press or to crush. But the other version that I read when it came to the word fool and how did a fool become a dessert was that there's other indications that the British would call desserts sort of fanciful or whimsical names. And because they didn't take this style of dessert quite seriously. The most serious part was, you know, the meat and the vegetables and the things that came prior to the savouries. So desserts tend to be a little bit of an afterthought. So, for example, you've got gooseberry fool. But if you also consider the word trifle, if you think of someone who's trifling, you tend to take them not too seriously because they're trifling. And apparently, from what I was reading, this was another sort of way that the British would sort of, I suppose, downplay that end course, which is dessert. So another word for this fool that I'm making, which is the traditional gooseberry fool, is actually a trifle. It's another word that they would sort of use quite commonly into play. And it was also known as wimwam as well, which I thought was really hilarious. So either way, a fool is either, you know, from the French word, which I'm kind of leaning towards, because a lot of our culinary techniques are very much deeply ingrained in French cuisine. In fact, when you're studying to be a chef, you study the French techniques on how to do certain mother sauces, etc., etc. So I'm kind of leaning towards that as being the answer to why we call this dessert a fool. But either way, it's delicious, so who really cares, right? So you guys are noticing that I'm definitely keeping an eye on this, and I'm definitely keeping a stir on this as well. Only because I don't want it to burn. I want it to colour really, really nicely. So we are starting to get a bit of action there, but I'm just going to stew a little bit further. So I'm just going to add a couple tablespoons of water. And as it's doing that, I'm literally just going to leave it to do its thing. I'm not going to step too far away. I'm going to keep an eye on it at all times, because the water will start to evaporate pretty quickly, which could mean that it might start to burn. I don't want that to happen, obviously. So a little bit of water is just going to help those apples just to continue on their quest to become nice and soft, so we can then incorporate it into our fool. So while the apples are doing their thing, let's get on to the next stage. So the next stage is actually pretty easy. I'll use that bowl, I think. And we need to whip up a bit of a meringue. So in order to make this quite light and fluffy, because the other ingredient that we're going to be using today is actually coconut cream, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, but I want to make it as light and fluffy as possible, because every time I think about a full as a style of dessert, I do tend to think of it as quite light and fluffy. So I want to fluffen up the cream a little bit, but I'm going to do that by actually taking one egg white and creating a bit of a meringue. So just with one, into a clean, nice clean bowl. Make sure your egg's at room temperature, that's really, really important. I'm going to save my egg yolk, of course. And then just taking up my whisk here. I'm just going to whisk it until I get lovely, almost firm peaks. Yes, of course you can do this by hand if you've got a whisk, 100%. But you know what, this is so much faster. So even after 30 seconds, 45 seconds of beating with my electric whisk, I already have something that's fairly firm, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So the next stage is to sweeten it up a little bit. And the way that I'm going to do that, I'm actually using 0 as sugar, so I'm using our pure erythritol here, but I want to create it into a fine powder, so almost like the consistency of, say, icing sugar or powdered sugar. So the way that I do that is I take our 0 as sugar, I need 2 tablespoons for this recipe, I put it into my little spice grinder or my little coffee grinder, and I literally blend it up until what I am left with is a fine powder that resembles icing sugar. So just sprinkle over 1 tablespoon of your powdered 0 as sugar. I'll leave that there, I'll probably use a little bit more later. Back to our electric whisk. Whisk it through. And this time, we're going to go for firm peaks. So you may be asking, how do you know if a peak is firm? When you pull the whisk out of the mixture, it should actually leave like marks of the whisk in the mixture. Then you know you've got lovely firm peaks. You should actually get it. Can you see that? See how it's just kind of hanging there? That's a great example of what a firm peak of egg white is. So that is now ready. The next thing I want to do, our apples, by the way, are looking really good. With the apples, bit of a stir, we've got a lovely stew action happening there. And they're beginning to get quite golden, which is wonderful. We want a bit of colour in this as well, don't we? So they're looking fabulous. I'm going to leave them just a little bit longer. Probably they need to cook for about 10 minutes in total time. So I'll leave them there while I do the next stage. Now, as I was saying before, we will be using coconut cream in this recipe. So this is our swap out for whipped cream, normal cow's cream. So what I did, and what you will need to do, is you need to leave your coconut can, and it's ideally you whip from a can here, good quality. I'm using an organic coconut cream here. You need to leave that in the fridge overnight or in the freezer for a couple of hours. Because what then happens when you do that is that the coconut solids rise up to the top and they thicken, and then the watery stuff hits the bottom. We only want to use the solids here to create our coconut cream. And so what you do is you take, or using a tablespoon, you very carefully break down into your can and you extract the thick stuff from the top of the can. And this is the stuff that we're going to use in our full. So this is our alternative to normal cow's cream, is we're using thickened coconut cream. And depending on the quality of your coconut cream will determine how much you can extract off it. So I'm getting about half a can of thick stuff, and the remaining stuff in the can is the liquid. Now do not throw that liquid away, because this liquid works really, really well in curries and soups and places that you might want to be using coconut water. That's basically what we have now at the bottom of our pan. So taking that, I'm going to take this time just a handheld whisk and just kind of break it up a little bit. It's quite thick, which is good, which is what we want. but it may even be a little bit too thick, which means that I now have the opportunity to just go along and just add a little bit more of that water, a little bit more of that coconut, hardened coconut cream if you can grab it, just add it into there, just like that. And what you're wanting to do is add enough liquid if you need to get almost the consistency of whipped cream. And depending on the quality, obviously, of your coconut cream and also the quality of your whisk. My whisk isn't doing a great job here, but it's okay. It's doing it all right. You just want to mix that through, but of course keep an eye on this. This is looking really good now, by the way. I've got that lovely, you can see that lovely golden colour on the apples. I am going to be adding just a couple more tablespoons of water. Now the reason why I'm doing that is I want to create almost like a little apple gravy from it. I want them to be moist. I want there to be a little bit of a sauce. So I'm just going to add that in, a couple tablespoons, so that your apples are nice and moist, which will mean when you go and add them to the full, I'm turning it off, they will have some wonderful moisture there as well. So the apples look absolutely fabulous. They look so incredibly good. So now that I've got a fairly decent whisk happening there, happy with that, and it's looking more and more like whipped whipped cream, which is great. I maybe need just a little bit more, just another tablespoon more, just to get it to that perfect consistency that is whipped cream, which is what we're after. We're now going to take that last tablespoon of powdered zero ash sugar to sweeten up our coconut cream. Remember, our zero sugar has 0 calories, 0 laxative effect, and 0 glycemic response as well, so it will not raise your blood glucose or raise your insulin. So that is now sweetened coconut cream, which is wonderful. I'm also going to add in just a touch of, I've got a pure vanilla extract here, just a touch, like half a teaspoon. That's all you need, just a touch of that's going to go in as well. And then we're going to take those whipped egg whites and we're going to combine the two. Now it's worthwhile just noting here that if you are concerned about eating raw egg, especially for anyone who's pregnant, I would probably avoid this recipe. But for myself, I know that my eggs are fresh. I know that my eggs are from a good source. And so I'm more than okay with having this, but just remember that it's not for everyone, especially if you are pregnant. This might be one that you want to avoid, or avoid adding the egg white. Just do the coconut and you'll be amazed at how good it is. So I've mixed those two together. I'm going to get rid of my whisk though, because I do not want to whisk the coconut into the egg whites. I just want to fold it. And the reason I want to fold it is I want to keep it light and fluffy. Remember what we were talking about before? Light and fluffy. But guess what, folks? That's pretty much the job done. So you could literally make this, for a dinner party. While your dinner party's going on, you steal away for 10 minutes and you cook this. You'll be a legend. You could do this in advance, finish this off, you'd be a legend. All right, let's grab ourselves something to serve it in. And probably the best thing to serve this dish in is a glass, especially a lovely decorative glass. It just looks so nice. And remember, you've got enough for 2 portions here. So the full mixture, which I believe, this is what they call the full mixture, which is the fruit, but everything combined is, for me, the full part of it. So let's start to combine. I normally start with a spoon of our whipped and lightened coconut. Start there. You kind of layer it if you can. Go ahead, another spoon. Oh, I do. It's right there in front of me. Just want to kind of layer this on. So let's do some apples next. Remember, it's enough for 2, so don't go overboard. You've got to save enough for the next portion. Some more of that wonderful, full, lightened cream. And then we top it all off with another spoon of that fabulous apple. Don't waste it, Bridget. Don't waste. There we go. Looking good. And why not? Just another little spoon on top. I have a little bit of the most beautiful smelling mint straight out of my garden, I kid you not. That can go on top there. And there is also absolutely nothing stopping you, let's put a spoon in it, there's nothing stopping you from getting out the old inulin and giving it a bit of a sprinkle as well. Now if you serve that to your guests, you will be the talk of the town, because this is something that you can create, as I was saying, in 10 minutes. It is delicious, it is fabulous, it is gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free and grain-free, yet it is decadent and spectacular and special. Whether you're sitting on the couch and you're consuming this out of a mug, or whether you're serving that to your guests at a dinner party, you are not going to be disappointed. So once again, this recipe is straight out of the cookbook. As you know, Treat Yourself Healthy is now available. This has been another episode of Cook the Book, where we take one recipe and we recreate it for you guys to then turn around and recreate it at home. Whether you've got the book and you want to see the video version, or whether you're thinking about the book, now you've got the video version, because you can make this at home for you and your family. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you next time right back here in my kitchen, Bridget's Healthy Kitchen Studio, for another episode of Cook the Book and Treat Yourself Healthy. Until then, take care, be well, be safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.